Well, good morning, gentlemen. Hello, everyone out there. Well, today we're going to do an open discussion on the paper 143A. It's titled Heaven, Hell, or the First Resurrection of the Dead. It's subtitled The First Resurrection of the Dead is the resurrection of the churches of God at the return of the Messiah. No other doctrine was the faith of the true Christians so clearly defined. Now, Wade, what would you like to let us know about this paper?
Well, this was the way you told a Christian from a fake, from a Baal-worshipping Gnostic who had penetrated the church under the doctrines of the god Attis. Justin Martyr wrote in the middle of the 2nd century, and around 154, he wrote his dialogue with Trypho, identifying what the doctrines of the true church were. And he said, when you come across people who say they are Christians, and that when they die they go to heaven, do not believe them. They are not, and he just said they are not, but he meant they are not Christians. And on that doctrine was the test of a true Christian and a fake, a Baal-worshipping Gnostic, because they taught that when they die they go to heaven. And that was ultimately to penetrate the Christian church and destroy it. On no other doctrine is the definitive test of a Christian so clearly defined. And Justin Martyr, he wrote that in his dialogue with Trypho in chapter 80. In chapter 52, he also wrote about there being 2 resurrections of the dead, and that the patriarch Jacob said that, and he detailed the structure of those resurrections. Now, when you go outside and you talk to somebody who says he's a Christian, and when they say Christian, they generally mean Trinitarian, Sunday worshipping, Christmas and Easter Gnostic. That's what they really mean by Christian. They then say, when you die, you go to heaven. Now, you know for a fact that those people are not Christians, and they will not be in the first resurrection because they don't keep the laws of God. That's the test. That was the test in the 1st century, that was a test in the 2nd century, and that was a test in every other century for those of the churches of God. Anyone who said that when they died they went to heaven, you knew was not a Christian, and they were never permitted in the church.
And there's plenty of scriptures in the Bible to attest to that fact. I mean, you know, most people know those, and papers that we supply through the CCG, you will find these biblical references. Don't think that we're just putting them out there. They're there. The proof will be right in front of you. There's, again, as in all the papers, there's quite a lot of subheadings, the information and links to other information within the church.
Sorry, just before we go on, I said in chapter 52, Jacob predicted the 2 advents of Christ, not the 2 resurrections. Rather, the 2 advents of Christ were what Jacob was talking about in chapter 52 of Justin Martyr, just to...
Right, yeah, and that indicates that he came once as the Lamb,
yes,
and once as a Lion.
Once as the priest Messiah, and the second time as the King Messiah.
The King to clean up the world, right?
Yeah, okay. But Jacob predicted that before even the Chumash was written.
Right, yep.
And again, and that is covered in that paper there.
Yeah. Yes.
Again, you mentioned Trypho, and his reply to those people that were saying, well, we are Christians, and one of the defining principles of being a Christian is that you realise you don't flutter off to heaven.
Yes, you're
in a resurrection.
Yeah, one of the 2.
Yes.
Yes, that's the biblical structure.
And the reward, of course, for a true Christian is to rule with Christ on earth for 1,000
Correct.
years.
Now, there is again a sequence here of the last days, the first resurrection. Is there anything you'd like to expand on that for us? And people can obviously go and read in more detail.
The sequence of the first resurrection. The structure we see in the build-up to the first resurrection is that the witnesses arrive after the war of the sixth trumpet, and they are there for 1260 days, and then they're killed at no, they can't be killed for the 1260 days. On the 1260th day in the afternoon they can be killed, and they will then lie in the streets for 3.5 days. That 3.5 days will see the world throw parties because they think that they're dead and that the tribulation, that still hasn't rained, but they've got a chance then. They can have a giant Christmas and Easter party all together because God's prophets are gone. And 3.5 days later, Christ appears in the morning of the fourth day, and they then are risen from the dead, and the first resurrection right around the world occurs.
Right.
Everyone in the first resurrection, which will be the 144,000 of the key elements and the great multitude, so that there's not just 144,000, there's a great multitude whom no man can number. They are then resurrected on the morning of the fourth day, and they go to Jerusalem to be with the Christ for the marriage supper of the Lamb. That structure then sees the nations panic. They get really worried, and they order the armies of the beast system and the world order, new world order, into Jerusalem to try and eliminate the Messiah. And they'll put it out as though they're aliens and they're foreign people arriving on the planet.
Sure. Yeah.
And so that's already planned, and they're already putting out the propaganda now before the witnesses are even here
Right.
about the aliens and
Yeah,
UFOs.
Oh,
and
yeah,
whatever.
exactly. Hollywood has been doing that for years.
Yes.
You know, tampering and programming people for
It's,
such a time.
and it's all satanic. It's designed to get people conditioned to fight against Christ
Right.
at the return.
Now, I know we've discussed this part before, but also within that section, there is a reference to the paper 166, which is the fallacy of that third resurrection. Now, a lot of people remain where they are and are too scared to move or say anything because they have this fear, well, I'm going to be thrown into this lake of fire.
Yeah, it's just-
What would you tell those people, Wade?
Well, wake up yourselves.
Right.
God is just, merciful, and he does not punish people without the opportunity of them giving knowing participation. The third resurrection was designed by the false prophets, that is the idle shepherd, the worthless shepherd, and his subordinate officers. And you've still got them out there who are saying, oh, if you leave us then you'll go to the third resurrection. Now what they did was they created in the minds of the brethren of the Sardis system and the world, they published this everywhere, that if you left them because of their false doctrines, then you would be subject to this cruel God who resurrected you, not to educate you and not to give you a chance at proper salvation, but he just resurrected you to throw you into a lake of fire. The cremation. So you didn't do anything but just pull them up, resurrect them for no purpose other than to put them into a lake of fire and kill them again. Now what sort of minds have these people got?
That's evil, yeah.
It is evil. and they are false prophets. Now, that's not what the Bible says at all. And what they did was they used Revelation 20 verse 13 to demonstrate a difference in the resurrections. And where Revelation 20 verse 13 says, and those who are in the seas, right, those who died at sea, they are resurrected. They've resurrected the same resurrection of those who died on land and everywhere else, right? But that's not what they did. They taught this insane jump. And the problem is that you've got people in their churches teaching the rubbish. It's lies, and it's non-Christian lies. But that's what they do. That's what these people teach, and we are going to deal with them. The heavenly host are going to have these people put to death and sent to the second resurrection, and they'll teach their lies no more, because we won't allow it in the second resurrection. Right. They will not be allowed to teach their lies anymore. The Herbert Armstrongs and all their offshoot leaders are going to be in places of safety until we can educate the populace properly.
Right. Yeah.
And there'll be over 30 billion people on the planet then. Mm. You think it's crowded now?
Right.
Wait till the second resurrection.
Yes, and by then we'll have the structures in place and be able to look after them all. But again, look, people, again, in the paper you can find all these informations. There's some really astounding knowledge here. So many that I know, so many people that I've loved, that are stuck with this idea that if they don't comply with what their false ministers are telling them, well, I throw away my salvation, I'll end up in the third resurrection. Mm. Well, take it from us, there's only two resurrections. The first one for the saints and the great multitude, the second one for everybody else, and you'll be brought up, you'll be trained, you'll be given that opportunity, and the only time you're going into the lake of fire will be when you've decided in that second resurrection phase of the Great White Throne Judgment, this isn't for me, you'll just be simply allowed to die. Once you're dead, your bodies, dead bodies, are then put into that lake of fire and they're incinerated.
There's no eternal suffering, you are just dead. There's no consciousness, and it'll be like that for eternity for you.
And just so that we all understand, only the Adamic race, that is the creation of Adam's children, will go to the resurrections. There'll be no Neanderthals in the resurrection, there'll be no Cro-Magnons, there'll be none of the previous existence of humanoids or proto-humanoids that Satan was playing with. Right. None of them will be in the resurrections. Okay. And that's why the Anakim and the Rephaim and those who were interfered with by the host will not be in the resurrections either.
Well, again, Wade, I mean, it is a great paper. It's one that, again, it will impart knowledge to anybody that's of a mind to go and grab it. Again, all free. There's no charge for it. Simply go to the webpage, have a look, you'll be able to find it. We'll include links for you as well. Wade, just before we finish up, is there anything else in this that you think would help those people out there that are standing either in psychosis, mindless inability to move, and go search out not only the one true God, but his end time church?
Yes, well, the simple fact of the millennial system is that if you wish to be under Christ, you have to obey the laws of God and the faith and testimony of Jesus Christ. Now, the reality is that if you don't keep the laws of God, that's what Christ said, you know, he gave the laws of God to Moses at Sinai. Acts 7 verses 30 to 53 says that. And it says that angel you have killed. That's what Stephen says in Acts 7. You killed that angel. And that's the Jews then stoned Stephen because he told them that they had just killed the angel of the presence, the Elohim of Psalm 45, 6 and 7. They just killed. And that's why they stoned Stephen. And Paul says in 1 Corinthians 10 verses 1 to 4 that rock was Christ. He was with them in the wilderness. He's the one that gave them water from the rock. He was the one that protected them for 40 years in the wilderness. He brought them out of Egypt. He gave them the law under Moses. He selected Moses to go into Egypt to do that and trained him in Midian through Jethro, the high priest of Midian. Now, this pre-existent Christ, and you can see that in the pre-existence of Christ 2:43, that is fundamental to the understanding of the Church of God. If you don't believe that Christ was pre-existent, you have no place in the Church of God, and we will not allow you in. It's that simple. And we've refused admission to radical Unitarians, and radical Unitarianism is covered in the papers. The 076 C series deals with radical Unitarianism and binitarianism, and it's important that you understand that if you don't believe that Christ gave the law to Moses, you've got a real problem with the Bible. You don't understand what's happening and who the angel of the presence was, and who is the being that's going to deal with you in the millennium and the first resurrection. When Christ gets here, the first resurrection will be resurrected and briefed to take over the world and do the job the demons should have been doing. And we'll replace them for the 1,000 years and over the resurrection. And we'll educate every person on the planet. And it's not God's will that any flesh should perish, and we'll make sure they don't perish. We'll educate every Catholic and Orthodox, Buddhist and Hindu. We'll educate the entire world to where they should have been before Satan interfered with our minds and the laws of God.
And that actually even includes the fallen host, doesn't it?
Yes. Yes. And the reality is that the demons, Paul says, no, you're not, you shall judge angels, 1 Corinthians 6:3. Now, that is that we're not going to be judging the angels that wiped our noses for the last 6,000 years of the loyal host. We'll be judging the fallen host. And what happens is that we have them killed. We'll kill them at the end of the millennial system and then resurrect them in the second resurrection. And they'll go into the training camps along with everybody else, but we'll have to put them in protective custody as well, because there are people who would think that they might like to get their hands on them when they're human beings. So the fact is that we'll cover that in the judgment of the demons, number 080.
Right.
And look, I'd just like to add to that. Some of you right there now be saying, what?
Yeah.
Telling you now, think of Christ, how he was part of the Elohim, and he was translated to human form. So don't you dare think that these demons and these fallen hosts, God does not have the power to put them into human form, because that's exactly what he's going to do.
Right.
All right, Wade, again, thank you. This was a little bit shorter, but I'm sure that there's much, much more to come. And
Yes.
we look forward to another discussion very shortly.
Okay.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.